Hello, all, and happy Independence Day. It is the evening of July 4th, 2023, and the Battle of Gettysburg, of course, is over. 160 years ago today, it was a pouring rain out here, and Robert E. Lee used that very skillfully to pull his army out and start the long trek back to Virginia. Now, the Gettysburg Campaign, it was originally called the Pennsylvania Campaign, but of course it became known as the Gettysburg Campaign because the central battle of it is here. It is officially considered to end once Lee is across the Potomac back in Virginia, because he's got to get back through Maryland to Virginia. It was a pouring down rain. He had a wagon train that was between 14 and 17 miles long of wounded. That wasn't his supplies. That wasn't his munitions. That was his wounded, 14 to 17 miles long. His army would never be the same. And that's usually where we stop the story. However, our army would never be the same either. The Army of the Potomac, and more specifically General Meade, shattered forever the myth of invincibility. And in military terms, or political terms even, once the myth of invincibility is shattered, anything can happen. It'd take another 2 years, of course, for the Civil War to end. It wouldn't be till April 1865. And even then, that's when Robert E. Lee surrendered. Joseph Johnston, who was the last major Confederate commander, he surrendered to Sherman down in North Carolina after Lincoln's assassination. But Lee's surrender is not just a symbolic end to the Civil War, it's the practical end. Because once Lee had surrendered, even if Johnston had wanted to keep fighting, the inevitable was inevitable. The only option would have been to disperse and become guerrillas. And one reason Lee and Johnson and other Southern leaders rejected the option of becoming guerrillas is the fact was the South, their homeland, was devastated, decimated, damaged, pick your term. A guerrilla war would be happening in the South where the conventional war had just been 4 years happening. It was a no-win situation. So Lee's surrender is the practical end of the war. The rest are the details that have to happen. Gettysburg by itself is not the turning point of the war for the Union. Gettysburg and Vicksburg together. Vicksburg was the Confederacy's last and greatest stronghold on the Mississippi. With Vicksburg, they bottlenecked Union commerce. We couldn't send our goods down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. And it also provided a secure connection for the east and western theaters of the Confederacy. From Vicksburg south, while the Confederacy controlled Vicksburg, they had plenty of corridors to move men and supplies back and forth. While Ulysses Grant took Vicksburg on July 4th, 1863, 160 years ago today. General Meade defeated Robert E. Lee yesterday. Together, those are the turning point. The Confederacy's last and greatest stronghold connecting its two halves was captured by our forces in the West. The Confederacy's most powerfully political and prestigious army was defeated in the East. Now, it's easy for us here in 2023 to look back and say that those two together, those were the fulcrum point that the war turned on, because we have the hindsight to see that after that, except for the major Confederate victory at Chickamauga, later in 1863, the Confederacy never recovered. And even the victory at Chickamauga was very short-lived because the Confederate commanders were not able to destroy the Union forces that were holed up in in Chattanooga. So it was literally all downhill for the Confederacy from here out, from July 3rd and 4th, 1863. But again, for us, for the United States, it was all uphill in the sense of things getting better. But we can see that now very easily. They couldn't back then. They were still slogging it out. But they did slog it out. And the story ends, and yet because it is history, because we can come in, we can walk these fields, we can see where they fought, we can stand where people lived, and we can find the exact spots sometimes where people died. It's a story we can keep alive. And it's a story we're actually living today. The Civil War was fought over slavery. Ultimately, that was the proximate and ultimate cause. But what's slavery? Slavery is a question of human freedom. After the Civil War, What did human freedom mean? Well, blacks were no longer slaves, but they weren't given the right to vote. We saw that turned out even after the 14th Amendment was passed. It took decades, if not a century, for that to be redressed. Women, though, black women, white women, no, women weren't even allowed to vote until the 19th Amendment was passed. The Civil War was a question of human freedom. It's a question we're still wrestling with today. And one of the difficult things about human freedom is that you can give almost total, abject, utter, complete freedom to some, but never to all. Because if you give total, abject, complete freedom to some, they're going to be trampling over everybody else. So how do you balance? How do you find that balance between giving as much individual and social freedom as possible while maintaining a cohesive society that protects everybody's rights? That's a question humans have been wrestling with for thousands of years. We're not going to answer it in our lifetimes. Our children won't. But it's one that's still going on. And that way, we're not fighting the Civil War per se. I reject that. I hear historians say that. We're still fighting the Civil War. Like, I reject that. But we're still fighting ourselves over the same questions. And we always will. That's part of human nature. Freedom is not the traditional human condition. For thousands and thousands of years, the human condition was slavery, dominant, monarchy, or royalty. The noble few controlling the masses. We were and still are an incredible experiment in self-government. It's going to be interesting to see where Gettysburg is at where we are at Gettysburg's 200th anniversary in 2063. And assuming I'm still alive, I will be here for that. I have every intention to be, but that's quite a ways away. For now, though, I'm tired. I have been running myself ragged, not just to get my programming done, and I do it because I believe in it. I think there are great stories to tell, and I love to tell stories. But also, there's a lot to see, and especially on an anniversary weekend like this. So I'm going to go shower, and I'm going to go to bed early. And then I am off to Mechanicsburg to see some friends tomorrow. It has been a good visit. I'm very glad I got here. This was a trip 10 years in the making. I promised myself back in 2013 I'd be here for this one, and I pulled it off. But all things, good and bad, must come to an end, and this has been a good thing, but the sun is setting literally on the day and figuratively on this particular trip. I'm going to take a shower, put my feet up, and just relax. Happy Independence Day. I will see you when I see you, and until then, go do some great things. Good morning once again. It is July 5th, 2023. I'm at Sachs Covered Bridge. It's a wooden covered bridge over Marsh Creek. It was completed in 1854, and elements of the Union Army tromped across it coming into the Battle of Gettysburg, and elements of the Confederate Army tromped across it getting the hell out of Dodge. And that would have been yesterday on July 4th. It has been a good trip. I've had to laugh at myself when I started these little, well, I shouldn't say little anymore. When I started this format of programming, it was just to give some little updates here or there till I got home to Florida and did all the big things. And I looked at what I did yesterday and realized, holy crap, those are whole freaking episodes. So I still have some travel log stuff to do when I get back to Florida. But I realized I told a whole lot more of the story than I thought I did. And that's not a bad thing. I think I actually enjoy this kind of programming too. Not to get rid of the studio stuff whatsoever, but I think this is going to be fun to add to my repertoire. But it's been a good trip. I said this was a trip 10 years in the making and 2 years in the planning. So I'm heading out. I'm going actually up to Mechanicsburg to see my friends Jerry and Michelle. And if any of you are familiar with the accidental detective mystery novels that I write, Jerry is actually my editor and coach. We were in the Navy together. He was my chief, and then I made chief, and he was my mentor. And now we describe ourselves as the best of enemies and mortal friends. I hope I told some good stories that kept you entertained, and of course I will see you on the flip side back in Florida. Until then, be safe, have a great July, and go and do great things.